Continuing our study or reading in the World and Thorinn by Damon Knight, Chapter 8, Section 3. There were faint sounds and movements beyond, sighing of air, clicks, then a grating noise. Thorinn guessed that the thing was looking about to see what had pressed the ring down. Silence. Thorinn held his breath, listening. A gray shape loomed over the ring, then a light and another and another. Thorinn sprang up in alarm. He got his good leg under him, kicked as the gray pincers taller than himself came forward. The thing tilted away from him, and he saw that it was a hollow structure of metal tubes, open above but with a complexity of solid parts below. The arms, pincers, lights, and eyes all attached to a sort of shield. The pincers loomed before him. When he awoke, he was in a moving place and his head hurt. He felt confused and tired, and it was easier to lie where he was on a narrow bed than to get up and worry about it. Beyond a large square cornered window, the tunnel wall streamed past swiftly and smoothly. The room swayed a little. He closed his eyes. Presently he felt better and sat up, but then he was dizzy, and he sat cross-legged on the bed, with his head in his hands. The bed was a narrow pallet on the floor. The smooth, rapid motion of the room continued. He raised his head and looked about. At the back of the room, there was a dark green basin with water trickling into it. His pallet was along one side, with another window over it, which he had not noticed before. On the gray floor lay his bundles, the talking box, and his sword. Light came from a square of crystal in the ceiling. There were 2 round crystals in the front wall also, but they were dark. He lurched to the basin, knelt, and drank until he could hold no more, then splashed a little water on his face. Beside the basin was a round hole in the floor. There was an odd smell in the room, like the stale of wild animals. Still feeling dizzy, he went back to the cot and sat down. Box, he said, what happened? The engine made you sleep and took you. Took me? What do you mean? Took me captive, I suppose? Yes, took you captive. Then that engine took you to a place where it met this engine and put you in it, still sleeping. Thorinn considered all this fuzzily. He felt where he should be frightened, but he was not, only interested. Where is it taking me? He asked. I don't know. Thorinn shut his eyes and thought. He remembered the engine coming at him with its pincers wide, lights and eyes blazing. Then nothing. Try as he would, he could not remember the rest. How did it put me to sleep? It made a kind of air that puts men to sleep when they breathe it. The box began showing him a picture of the engine, and then of smaller and smaller parts of it, but Thorinn said, later. With an effort, he leaned over to pick up the sword in its scabbard and tried to put it through his belt, but it was too much trouble, and he laid it on the pallet. Beyond the window, the light rings of the tunnel flashed by. If he followed one with his eyes for an instant, he could see it before it disappeared, but otherwise they all blurred together, yet there was no wind. With an effort, he turned and put his hand to the window over his cot. It was filled with a sheet of crystal so clear he could not see it. Box, he said, you've been the death of me. The box was silent. Why did you tell me the engine would take me safely to the bottom? When I was made, that was true. Thorinn turned this over in his mind and could make nothing of it. Why isn't it true now, then? I don't know. Then what use are you? I can talk into another talk. I can answer questions about things that are not different since I was made. I can show pictures. I can... Enough, said Thorinn. Leave me alone, can't you? Yes, Thorinn. The box fell silent. Thornton got up and eased himself above the round hole in the floor and drank more water and lay down again. Presently he slept. When he awoke, he was hungry and his wounds throbbed. He ate some of the meat from his bundles and drank from the basin. He tried a little of the fruit he had brought, but it was rotting, and he threw it down the hole. He felt anxious and tight. Whatever it was that had made him sleepy before seemed to have worn off. He noticed a thin crack in the wall outlining an upright oblong beside the window across the room, and realized for the first time that it must be a door. Above it was a curious set of complicated shapes nestled into one another. After staring at this for some time with growing uneasiness, Thornton realized that it resembled nothing so much as a pair of metal arms and pincers, like those of the engine that had captured him. A little later, he noticed a second, smaller pair down at the other end of the room. Unfolded by the look of them, the two sets of metal arms would be able to reach into any part of the room. There was nothing to hide behind, nothing movable in the room except his own belongings and the thin pallet, which was too flimsy to be of any use. Thornton crossed the room and tried to wedge the point of his sword into the crack beyond the door, then into the space between two pieces of one of the metal arms, but without success. He returned to the cot. Box, how long have we been traveling? We have been traveling for half a day and the sixth part of a day. Thornton tried to puzzle this out and gave up. How far have we come? We have come to thousands of ells and 800s of thousands of ells. Thornton whistled. How much further are we going then? I don't know. What do you know? I know this animal and this plant. Pictures appeared in the crystal as it spoke. And this and this and this engine. A tangle of metal rods. And this plant and peace, said Thornton wearily. When I ask you a question like that, don't answer. The box fell silent. Presently, Thornton felt something pulling him forward, and the light rings began to move more slowly past the windows. The rings widened and receded, and he had just time to realize that they had come to a junction where the tunnel met a shaft when there was a lurch, and the rings tilted in a dizzying fashion. Thornton sat down abruptly, feeling heavier than he had since he left the midworld, then heavier still. When he was able to lift his head again, the light rings outside were flickering downward past the window. After a minute or so, he felt himself growing lighter again, but the wall of the shaft remained blurred. He became as light as he had been before, then even lighter. He felt himself drifting away from the floor and clutched vainly for something to hold on to. The box and his other belongings were floating into the air, as if they were all falling together, but the evidence of his eyes told him that the engine was rising. Box, he cried, what's happening? We have stopped moving faster. The engine and everything in it are falling with the same quickness. Therefore, there is nothing to hold them together. The room was slowly drifting around Thornton in a lopsided circle, while the box and his bundles pursued different directions. Thornton reached for one of the bundles as it floated by and caught it by the cord, but when he pulled, all that happened was that the bundle came to him, bounced off his chest, and began drifting lazily away again, while the room took on a different rotation. Box, I don't understand, said Thornton. How can we be falling up? We are not falling up. We are falling down. That's the end of section 3.